How do you react when your own aunt stands up at her baby's first birthday party and tells the whole room her son is actually your late father's child and she wants half of your house as inheritance? How do you stay calm when she waves documents in your face and everyone looks at you like you're stealing from a baby? I just smiled, said I understood, and tried not to laugh, because my dad had prepared for this years ago. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Omar, and the day my father's body was burned, my aunt chose balloons and cake. I woke up that morning in a house that suddenly felt too big. My father's slippers were still by the door. His mug was by the sink. His reading glasses lay on the small table next to his old armchair with a folded newspaper under them. It looked like he had just stepped out and would be back in a minute. Instead, his photo was already in a frame on the dining table, with a small garland my mother had bought late the night before. My mother, Sarah, moved around the kitchen like a ghost. She told me we should leave soon for the farewell ceremony. Her voice was flat. I just nodded. I did not trust my voice yet. I put on the white shirt she had ironed. It felt too stiff on my skin. The cremation hall was crowded when we arrived. The air was thick with incense and smoke. People came up to me one by one. They said they were sorry. They said my father was a good man. They said he worked hard. They said the usual things people say when they do not know what else to say. I thanked them. I stood next to the big framed photo of my father and tried to focus only on his face. His eyes in the photo looked calm, like they always did when he checked a building plan or read a contract line by line at the table. Behind me, I could hear my mother's relatives whispering. I have known their voices all my life. I did not need to turn around to know who said what. One cousin said that my father must have left a lot of money. Another said that the house alone was worth around $800,000. Someone else said that I was lucky because I was an only child and would take everything. Nazma, my aunt, my mother's younger sister, said that it was only fair if the family shared the blessings. She said that my father had always eaten at their table, that he was part of their side too. She said that my mother's family had helped raise me, so in a way, everything my father had belonged to all of them. I did not turn. I just closed my eyes for a moment and tried to breathe. I told myself I should let it pass. It was a heavy day. People say stupid things when they are stressed. That is what I told myself. When the formal part of the ceremony ended, I helped carry the flowers. My mother cried quietly beside me. My mother's mother, my grandmother Farida, sat on a plastic chair and fanned herself, saying she felt dizzy. In the middle of this, Nazma came to my mother and touched her arm. She said that we must not forget that it was also Imran's first birthday. She said that it would look cold and disrespectful if we skipped the party. She insisted that life and death always walk together, and that a baby's birthday could help balance the sadness of the day. My mother looked torn. She said she did not have the strength, but she also said that Nazma would be hurt if we did not go. She turned to me and asked what I thought. I did not want to go. The idea of balloons and cake after smoke and prayer made my stomach turn, but my mother's eyes were full of guilt and fear. So I said that we could go for a short time. We drove straight from the farewell ceremony to the restaurant where the party was held. I still smelled like incense. My shirt now felt too loose instead of too stiff. In the parking lot, I saw colorful balloons tied to the gate. Children were running around, already sticky with juice and frosting. Inside the banquet room, the music played too loudly. Cartoon characters were printed on the wall. Imran sat on a small chair shaped like a throne, wearing a tiny crown. He was only 1 year old. He stared at everyone with big, confused eyes. He had no idea that he was about to become the center of a storm. Nazma spotted us at the door. She came over with her arms wide, perfume strong enough to cut through the smell of food. She hugged my mother, then me, and said she was glad we came. She looked at my plain white clothes and made a comment about how life must go on. I heard the pressure under her words. We sat at a table near the back. I tried to blend into the chair. Some of my cousins came to say hello. Their eyes slid over me in a strange way. Half pity, half calculation. I knew they had heard the same whispers I had heard at the cremation hall. The host of the restaurant tapped the microphone. He said that Nazma wanted to make a small speech before the cake cutting. The music was turned down. People started to gather around the main table where Imran sat. Nazma stood next to him, holding the microphone with one hand and a folder of papers with the other. I watched my aunt take a deep breath. She looked around at all the faces, then she started speaking. I will not repeat every word, but I can tell you the shape of them. She talked about life, about family, about sacrifice. She said her son was a blessing. She said he connected past and future. She said there were things the family did not know about, things that would shock them. People leaned forward, hungry for drama. My mother's back went rigid in the chair. Then Nazma said that Imran was not just her son. She said he was also the child of a man who had just left this world. She said clearly that Imran was the son of my father, Yusuf. The room went silent. Only one drunk uncle let out a weird half-laugh before he saw my face and shut his mouth. Nazma continued. She said that she had kept this secret for a long time to avoid shame and problems. She said she had not wanted to hurt anyone. She said that now that my father was gone, she had to tell the truth, for Imran's sake. She said her son deserved his rights. She lifted the folder so everyone could see it. She said she had documents. She said there were bank slips, notes, proof that my father had supported his other child. She shook the papers a little, as if the sound alone would prove something. Then she turned in my direction. She did not look at me. She looked over my head, toward the whole room. She said in a loud voice that Imran, as my father's son, had a right to inheritance. She said that since the house my father left behind was worth around 800,000, it was only fair that she, as the mother of his younger son, would claim half of it for Imran. I felt the blood drain from my face. The house that my father and I had bought together, the house where every wall held his touch, the house that still smelled like his shaving cream, his notebooks, his coffee. All at once, I felt hundreds of eyes on me. People turned in their chairs. Some whispered that it was shocking, but fair. Some said that now I should do the right thing and not hold on to everything. One cousin looked at me like I was already guilty of stealing from a baby. My mother grabbed the edge of the table. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Her whole body shook. Nazma looked so sure of herself. She smiled like she had just done something brave. She said that she did not want to fight. She said she only wanted justice for her son. She said that if we handled this well as a family, there would be no need for lawyers or court. I stared at the folder in her hand. The plastic cover was bent at the corners. I thought of my father, sitting at our dining table late at night, wearing his reading glasses, going through every line of every document. I remembered how he would sign 3 copies of everything and keep them in neat piles. I remembered how he would say that if something was important, it deserved paper and stamps, not whispers and tears. In that moment, something inside me that was shaking slowly became still. People began to murmur. They waited for me to explode, or cry, or shout that she was lying. I could feel that expectation pressing on my skin like heat, but anger did not come the way they expected. What came was a strange, cold clarity. I stood up, very slowly. My chair scraped against the floor. The sound was louder than it should have been. My mother tugged at my sleeve. She whispered my name. Her voice was thin and scared. I put my hand over hers and told her I understood. My voice was calm, even to my own ears. Nazma watched me. She tilted her chin like she was ready for a fight. She pressed the folder to her chest as if it were a shield. I told her I heard her. I said that if she believed she had rights, she should not be afraid to use proper channels. I said that my father always believed in doing things correctly. I repeated that I understood. She looked a little confused at my tone. It was not the response she expected. Some people snickered softly. Others frowned, trying to read my face. Inside, I was trying not to laugh, and that surprised even me. I was not laughing because it was funny. I was fighting laughter because I could almost see my father's expression if he had been there. I could hear him asking why anyone would try to make a claim like that with only a messy folder of papers in a birthday hall instead of going to the right office. I thought about something very specific, something only he and I had talked about when we signed the papers for the house. The memory sat in my mind like a solid stone. It made me feel less afraid. We did not stay for the cake. My mother could not eat. I did not want to taste anything. We left quietly while people still argued in small groups, giving us side glances. Nazma let us go. She said loudly that she was sure I would come to my senses. Outside, the air was cooler. The sky was starting to turn soft and dark. My mother cried in the car. She said she did not know what to do. She said she never imagined her own sister would do something like this. She asked me if I thought it could be true. I told her that we would find out properly. I told her that guessing would not help. I told her that my father had always kept his life in order and we would follow that path. When we reached home, the house was quiet, almost too quiet. I helped my mother inside and made her sit on the couch. I brought her some water. She held my hand like I was still a child. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw a message from an unknown number. The text was short. It said that they were the law office that had handled Yusuf Rahman's estate planning and that they needed to meet with me about the house and some instructions my father had left. I stared at the screen, with my father's glasses still lying on the nearby table, and felt that cold clarity settle even deeper. The message from the law office stayed on my screen for a long time. My mother kept asking what it was. I told her it was just something about my father's papers and that I would look at it later. I did not want to add more weight to her already heavy shoulders that night. After she went to bed, I sat alone in the living room. The house felt like a body with the heart removed. The clock on the wall ticked too loudly. I read the message again. They said they had handled my father's estate planning, and they needed to speak with his legal heir about the house and some instructions. I put the phone down and leaned back. My mind went back, not to the day of his death, but far earlier, to a small rented apartment where we used to live when I was a boy. Back then, my father would come home covered in dust from construction sites. He always smelled like cement and sweat and cheap soap. He never complained. He would sit on the floor, stretch out his back, and ask me about school. I would tell him about my math test, about how I liked drawing buildings. He would nod and say that buildings did not lie. If you measured right and placed your lines correctly, they stood. If you ignored the rules, they fell. My mother's family visited a lot in those days. My grandmother, Farida, would come and say that the neighborhood was too noisy. She would tell my mother that my father should move us closer to real family. My mother would nod and complain about the distance. I would sit in the corner and listen to them speak, as if my father was just another service, like electricity or water. My Aunt Nazma came even more often once she was old enough to travel on her own. Back then, she was not married yet. She was always dressed nicely, always talking about some new job or some new friend who would surely change her life. She liked to say that she deserved good things because life had been hard for her. I remember one night when she came with a worried face. She told my father that she had a problem with a landlord and needed money for a deposit on a new place. She said she would pay it back quickly. My father sighed, but did not argue. He said that family helped each other. He went to his small metal locker, took out some cash, counted it twice, and gave it to her. She hugged him as if he had saved her life. I also remember that she never gave that money back. As I grew older, I noticed a pattern. When Nazma needed something, she came to us, not to her own brother or to her cousins. She said my father was solid, the word she always used. Solid, like a wall that would never fall. She said my father understood responsibility. Each time she promised to repay, and each time she did not. My mother would complain later, in the kitchen, when they thought I was asleep. She would tell my father that her family took him for granted. She would say they saw him as a bottomless pocket. My father would say that it did not matter, that at least we knew we had done the right thing. But his face, when he thought no one saw him, always looked older on those nights. When I turned 18, my father and I moved into this house. It was not as big then as it is now. We have fixed and expanded it over the years. I remember the day we signed the papers. My father took me with him on purpose. He said that if my name was going to be on the documents, I should see every step. At the property office, he read each page slowly. The agent was impatient. He tried to tell my father that no one read everything, that people just signed. My father ignored him. He checked the price, the land description, the names, the dates. He told me quietly that paper was safer than trust. He made sure my name stood with his as a co-owner. He told me he wanted me to feel the weight and the safety of it at the same time. After we left, he stopped at a small shop and bought a folder and a notebook. At home, he labeled each section of the folder with neat handwriting. He told me where he would keep it. He told me that if anything happened to him, I should always start with the papers and not with rumors. That memory sat in my chest now, like a small, steady light. The days after the funeral and the birthday party passed in a strange fog. My mother kept calling relatives. Some called us. Some came to visit. But their visits felt different now. There were more questions, more cautious looks. Nazma called once, then twice, then many times. When I picked up, she spoke as if we were in the middle of a negotiation. She reminded me again and again that Imran was my little brother. She said that sharing the house would show I was a good man. When I stayed quiet, she added thin threats. She said she would not have a choice but to go to court if I tried to shut her out. She said she had proof. She said she did not want to hurt my mother, but she would do what she had to do. I told her, in a calm voice, that if she believed she had rights, she should follow proper ways. I said that I would do the same. She did not like that answer. She hung up quickly. My grandmother, Farida, called my mother and cried. She said that the family was falling apart. She said we should just give something to Nazma to keep peace. She said we could not let a child be punished. My mother tried to explain that it was not that simple, that the house was not only money but also our life, our home. They ended their call with both of them in tears. At the same time, my life outside the family went on. I went back to work at the engineering office after taking a few days off. The open plan floor buzzed with keyboards and quiet conversations. My colleagues told me they were sorry for my loss. Then they went back to asking my thoughts on load calculations, material choices, and safety margins. My manager trusted my judgment. When I gave a number, he accepted it. When I pointed out a risk, he listened. No one there looked at me like I was a piece of meat on a plate, ready to be cut and shared. It was almost strange, moving between that world and my family's world. One afternoon, after work, I went to visit Nazma in her apartment. I wanted to see her life with my own eyes, not just through her words. Her building was old and noisy. Children ran in the corridor. The walls smelled of cooking oil and damp clothes. Inside, her apartment was crowded. There were clothes on chairs, bills on the table, toys on the floor. The television was on, playing some loud show. Imran crawled near the sofa. When he saw me, he smiled with that open, simple trust babies have. It hit me that none of this was his fault. He was just a child in people's hands. Nazma started talking as soon as I sat down. She complained about the landlord, about prices, about how hard life was. She said that if I gave her half of the house, she could finally move to a better area. She said her son deserved a garden, a bigger room, a safer life. She said I had more than enough. I listened. I did not argue. I just stored her words in my mind. When she finished, I told her again that lawyers and documents would decide anything to do with the house. She rolled her eyes and said I was hiding behind cold paper. She said my father would have wanted us to share. I thought about the exact opposite. My father's careful checking, his comments about certain relatives. But I did not say that yet. A few days later, my mother and I went to my grandmother, Farida's house. It was the same cramped place where my mother had grown up. The paint peeled from the walls. Old photos hung in crooked frames. The smell of strong tea and old cushions filled the rooms. Nazma was already there, sitting with a group of cousins. As soon as we walked in, the air changed. The conversation shifted from light gossip to heavy silence. Then, slowly, they began to talk again, but now the topic was us. Nazma told everyone that I was being cold. She said I was hiding behind lawyers. She said I refused to recognize my own brother. She said that my father had made promises to her. She did not say when or how. She just repeated that word, promises. Some cousins shifted in their seats. One asked me why I was being so hard. Another said that even if half the house was too much, I should at least offer something to show goodwill. It felt like I was sitting in front of a small homemade court, with my aunt as the judge, the jury, and the victim all at once. I kept my tone calm. I said that I was not refusing anything that was real. I said I only wanted facts. I said that my father had put his life on paper for a reason, and that I would look at those papers before I agreed to any story. Nazma said I was calling her a liar. I did not answer that directly. I simply repeated that the truth would be in the dates, the signatures, the medical records, the property files. Some people frowned when I said that. Others looked thoughtful. My grandmother just pressed her hands together and whispered that she wished her daughters would stop fighting. On our way home, my mother cried again. She said she never thought her sister would stand against her like this. She worried that the whole family would turn on us. I told her that families sometimes needed borders, just like buildings. Without them, everything collapsed. She said that I sounded like my father. That night, after my mother went to bed, I walked into my father's old room. His clothes still hung in the wardrobe, his shoes lined up neatly at the bottom. On the small desk by the window, there was a locked drawer. I had the key. He had given it to me years ago, but I had never used it while he was alive. He had told me that the drawer was for important things, and that if anything ever happened to him, I should start there. My hands shook a little as I unlocked it. Inside, there were folders stacked neatly, labeled with dates and names, bank statements, contracts, tax receipts. Under those, there was a smaller, worn notebook with a dark cover. It looked older than the other items, like he had carried it around for a while. I opened it. Inside, I found his familiar handwriting. On one page, near the middle, there was a name written clearly, a lawyer with a phone number and an address. Beside the name, there was a date. That date was circled in red ink. It was from several years ago, long before Imran was born, around the time my mother had once mentioned some drama with her sister, but never explained. I stared at the red circle. It felt like my father was reaching out through the pages, pointing at a path he had prepared for me. I closed the notebook carefully and held it in both hands. For the first time since the funeral, I felt not just grief, but direction. The next morning, I woke up with the notebook still on the nightstand next to my bed. I had fallen asleep reading the same page over and over, the one with the lawyer's name and the date circled in red. The ink had faded a little with time, but the circle was still clear, like a quiet alarm that had been waiting years to ring. I went to the kitchen and made tea. My mother sat at the table, staring at nothing. She looked smaller than I remembered, like life had pressed her down overnight. I put a cup in front of her. She thanked me, but her eyes didn't move much. I thought about telling her what I had found, but I held back. I did not want to give her hope or fear until I knew more. My father had gone to a lawyer for a reason, and that reason was probably not simple. I told her I needed to handle some of my father's papers later. She just nodded. She said she would go to visit my grandmother because Nazma had sent a message saying they needed to talk as a family. My mother still believed that talking could fix things. I was starting to understand that talking, without structure, only gave some people more space to push. I spent the morning cleaning my father's room a little, not changing too much, just dusting and folding. I wanted my hands to be busy while my mind worked. I thought about Nazma's speech at the party, about her words in my grandmother's house. The more I replayed them, the more they sounded like a script she had rehearsed for a long time. In the afternoon, I heard a car door slam outside. Then another, then voices. Not the casual kind. Sharp, organized, like a group arriving for a task. I looked out the window and saw Nazma, her husband Deepak, my grandmother Farida, and 2 of my cousins walking up to the house. Nazma carried the same folder from the birthday party. Deepak walked behind her, his hands in his pockets, his eyes scanning the front of the house like he was measuring it. My mother came out of her room at the sound. Her face went pale. She whispered that she didn't know they were coming. I told her it was fine. I told her to sit if she wanted. I opened the door before they could start banging. Nazma walked in without waiting for an invite. Her perfume hit me first, then her voice. She said they were there to clear things up. She said she didn't want rumors and confusion. She said she wanted everything to be transparent and fair. They all gathered in the living room. My grandmother sat heavily on the couch. She looked tired and embarrassed, but she didn't stop Nazma. My cousins hovered near the doorway, their phones in their hands, not recording yet, but ready. Nazma took a deep breath and started her speech again, but this time with less decoration. She said Imran was Yusuf's son. She said she had proof. She said she didn't want to hurt us, but she could not let her child be denied what was his by right. Then she changed her tone. She said that since she was reasonable, she would settle for a clear agreement about the house. She said it was worth $800,000 and that we should sign something now saying that half of it would be held for Imran when he grew up. She opened her folder, took out a few loose papers with lines and signatures already half written, and laid them on the coffee table like a dealer laying down cards. My mother stared at the papers as if they were snakes. She started to say that we should wait, that we should talk to someone neutral. Nazma cut her off. She told her not to worry, that this was family, not strangers. She said that if we did not sign now, she would have to assume we were acting in bad faith. I sat in the armchair opposite them. I made sure my hands rested on the wooden arms, visible and still. I did not want to look defensive. I wanted to look like what I felt inside now, strangely calm. I told Nazma I wouldn't sign anything today. She frowned. She asked why not. She said this showed I didn't trust her. I told her calmly that trust and signatures were 2 different things. I said that this house was not bought in secret, not built in the dark. It had a full record, proper papers, property files. I said that if she wanted to claim something, she should be ready for everything to be checked properly. Dates, names, medical records, money, all of it. One of my cousins muttered that I was trying to scare her. Nazma straightened up and said she wasn't afraid. She said she knew the truth. She said my father had been weak and had made mistakes. She implied things about him that made my mother flinch as if struck. That was when my patience shifted into something else. Not rage, but a new kind of hardness. I asked Nazma to tell me exactly when she thought Imran was conceived. I asked her to say the month, and if she could, the rough week. She blinked, surprised by the change in my questions. She gave a date range, waving her hand like it was not important. She said a real father knows his child without calendars. I repeated the month in my head. Then I matched it with a different memory. My father in a hospital bed, pale and swollen after surgery, tubes everywhere, too weak to sit up. I remembered visiting him every day after work. I remembered the smell of disinfectant and fear. I asked Nazma again, slowly, if she was certain about that time. She insisted. She said I was trying to twist things. She said I was acting like a lawyer, not a son. My grandmother begged us to stop. My mother cried openly now, covering her face with a scarf. Deepak finally spoke, in a low voice. He said that arguments weren't useful, that we should just sign some kind of agreement and adjust later if needed. His eyes stayed on the house, not on any of us. I knew then that this was not about truth for them. It was about opportunity. I told them again that I would not sign. I told them that, in fact, I would be contacting the law office that had already sent me a message. I made sure to say that out loud, clearly. I said that if there was any truth to their claim, it would survive under real light. If there wasn't, it would burn. Nazma's face twisted. She said I was threatening her. I told her I wasn't. I told her I was simply refusing to be bullied in my own house with half-finished papers. I said that if she wanted to follow the law, then we would follow the law all the way. My cousins shifted uncomfortably. One of them tried to calm Nazma down, whispering that lawyers were expensive. Nazma snapped at him and said she wasn't afraid of any lawyer. She said she had been patient for a long time and was done begging. After some more shouting from her and some tears from my mother, they finally left. As the door closed behind them, the house felt strangely quiet, like the moment after a storm when you're not sure if it's over. My mother collapsed on the couch. She kept saying that it had gone too far, that they were going to destroy the family. I sat next to her, but my mind was already moving in a different track. Later that evening, I walked to a small cafe near the area where my father's old construction office used to be. I had called Mr. Jensen, our neighbor and longtime friend, and asked if he could meet me there. He agreed right away. He said he had things to say about my father that maybe I needed to hear now. The cafe was almost empty. The lights were soft. Mr. Jensen arrived with his usual slow steps, leaning on a cane. He looked older than the last time I had really spoken to him, but his eyes were sharp. He ordered tea. I did the same. We sat at a small table by the window. Outside, the sky was turning orange. He asked me how I was. I gave the simple answer people give when the real one is too long. Then I told him about Nazma's claim in simple words. I did not add emotion. I just said that she was now saying her son was my father's child and that she wanted half the house. He sighed. It was a long, tired sound. He said that he was not surprised. He said that my father had worried about something like this before. He told me about a period a few years back when my father had stopped going to work for a while because of a serious operation. He reminded me of the hospital visits, the recovery time, the specialists. Then he added details I did not know, about the type of surgery, about the doctors telling my father that certain physical things would never be the same. I listened to him, and suddenly the timelines in my head started to line up like clean rows. The month Nazma had pointed to as Imran's conception, my father had been barely able to stand without help then. He had been dealing with pain, medication, and long consultations. The idea that he had, during that same time, secretly started a relationship and fathered a child in my aunt's apartment felt less like a secret and more like a badly written story. Mr. Jensen also reminded me of something else. He said my father had mentioned going to a lawyer around that time because of some nonsense from the extended family. He had told him that he was going to put everything in clear writing so that no one could twist his illness or his mistakes in the future. There it was again. The lawyer, the date in red, the planning. By the time I left the cafe, the last pieces of doubt inside me had turned into something else. Not certainty about every detail, but certainty that I could not leave this to emotions and shouting matches in living rooms. My father had lived his whole life fighting chaos with structure. He had tried to give that gift to me. Walking home, I decided. I would stop trying to keep the peace by standing still while they pushed. I would move, but in the direction my father had laid out. I would follow the paper, the dates, the real records. I would not scream or make scenes at birthday parties. I would not trade insults in group chats. I would speak through the systems they feared and respected, law, documents, official rooms with glass walls. When I reached home, my mother had gone to bed. The house was dark except for the light in the hallway. I went straight to my room, took out my phone, and opened the message from the law office again. My fingers hovered for a moment over the call button. Then I pressed it. A calm voice answered, gave the name of the firm, and asked how they could help. I said my name. I said I was the son of Yusuf Rahman. I said I had received a message about his estate planning and needed to speak to whoever had handled his case. They transferred me to a woman who introduced herself as Claudia. Her voice was steady, professional. She remembered my father's name right away. She said she had met him several times over the years. She said he had been very thorough. I told her in simple terms what was happening now. I did not tell every detail, just that a family member was claiming my father had another child and wanted to claim part of the house. She did not sound surprised. She asked for some dates. She asked when the child was born, when my father had his surgery, when he had come to see her. I gave her what I knew. There was a short silence on the line. Then she said that she believed my father had already taken steps to prevent exactly this kind of situation. She said we needed to meet in person. She said she would prepare his file and schedule a family estate review meeting so that everything could be looked at properly. After the call ended, I stood there with the phone still in my hand. A few minutes later, as I sat on the edge of my bed, the screen lit up with a new email notification. It was from Claudia's office. The subject said, Estate Review, Yusuf Rahman. Inside was a short note confirming an appointment in 2 weeks and a calendar invite attached. I clicked it open and saw the date, time, and place. I accepted the invite, and as the little box turned into a firm block in my calendar, I felt something inside me settle into place as well. The 2 weeks before the meeting did not feel like waiting. They felt like walking on a path someone had drawn for me a long time ago. The day after I got the email from Claudia's office, I woke up earlier than usual. The house was quiet. My mother was still asleep. I looked at the calendar on my phone again. The date of the meeting sat there like a small, solid block of time. I decided that I would not spend the days until then just worrying. I would use them. I started with the simplest thing, the property. At the municipal records office, the air smelled like paper and old dust. People stood in lines, holding folders, clutching small numbered tickets. A bored clerk called numbers from behind a glass window. I took my own number and sat on a hard plastic chair. When it was my turn, I explained that I needed copies of all the records related to my house. I gave them the address, my name, and my father's name. The clerk checked her computer, then went to a back room. While she was gone, I watched other people fill out forms. Some looked confused, some annoyed. No one looked surprised to be here. This was where people came when life moved on paper. The clerk came back with a thin file. She told me there were records about the purchase, the registration, and some later updates. She said I could pay a small fee to get certified copies. I agreed. She stamped several sheets, then slid them under the glass. I did not stand there reading every line. I knew this was not the place. I put the papers carefully into my own folder and thanked her. On my way out, I glanced at the top page. I saw my father's name, my name, the date we had first bought the house. Then my eye caught a more recent date and a phrase that made my stomach tighten a little. I did not stop to study it. I simply noted that there had been official changes a couple of years ago. That matched the red circle in my father's notebook. From there, I went to the hospital. The reception area was bright and cold. People in scrubs moved quickly through sliding doors. I went to the records desk and said I needed information about my father's treatment history. I had brought his death certificate and my ID, like the woman on the phone had told me. The woman behind the desk was kind but distant. She said there were procedures, forms, privacy rules, even after death. I filled out what she gave me. I wrote my father's full name, his date of birth, our address. I waited again on another plastic chair while she went into another back room. This waiting felt different from the waiting at the records office. There, I had felt like I was dealing with concrete and land and numbers. Here, I felt the weight of blood and cells and fragile things. When she returned, she carried a slim file. She said that I could not see every single detail that day, but she could give me a summary of the major events and dates, and I could request more through the proper channels if needed. She showed me a printed sheet. On it, there were lists, tests, hospital stays, surgeries. My eyes moved down the page until they reached the operation I remembered best. The date was there, in simple black ink. Next to it, a description. It mentioned serious complications and a recovery period. There were notes that suggested long-term effects. One part, in dry medical language, mentioned that certain functions would be permanently reduced. I read that line twice. It sat in my mind next to Nazma's confident claim about conception dates. The two did not fit. One would have to move, and I already knew which one would not. I thanked the woman. I asked how to request full copies for legal purposes. She told me the process. I noted it carefully, then I left. Back at my own office, everything looked the same as always. Desks, screens, coffee mugs, rolled-up blueprints. I sat at my workstation and opened my email. There were project updates, meeting notes, a message from my manager thanking me for catching a problem in a design last week. My brain split itself in two. One part focused on the building calculations on my screen. The other part kept turning over dates, names, and phrases like long-term effect. During lunch, I took out my phone and created a new email folder. I named it simply Nazma. I forwarded every message she had sent me in the last weeks. Messages where she hinted at court, messages where she said she would ruin my name if I did not do the right thing, messages where she implied my father had been weak and dishonest. I also saved screenshots of the family group chat where she spoke about inheritance and rights as if everything had already been decided. I did not answer most of those messages directly. When I replied at all, I kept it simple. I said that lawyers would handle things. I said that I would follow my father's written instructions. I did not insult or accuse. I did not want to give her anything she could twist later. One afternoon, my colleague noticed I seemed distant. He asked me if everything was all right. I told him my family had some property issues after my father's death. He winced and said that family and money never mixed well. Then he changed the subject, giving me space. For a moment, I was grateful to be in a world where people respected boundaries without yelling. A few days later, my mother asked me to go with her again to my grandmother Farida's house. She said there was going to be a small family gathering. Nazma had insisted. My mother looked nervous, but hopeful. She said that maybe, face to face, they could calm things down. I agreed to go, but my reasons were different from hers. I wanted to see how far Nazma would push now that she knew I was not signing anything. Farida's house had not changed. The same thin curtains hung in the windows, the same old clock ticked too slowly on the wall. The same framed wedding photos of her children looked down from shelves. Nazma was there before us, sitting on the main sofa like it was a throne. Deepak sat next to her, silent. A few cousins sat on plastic chairs. Annika, her older daughter, lounged in a corner, phone in hand. She kept tapping the screen, checking something. I had seen enough of her social media to guess she was waiting for more drama to feed her followers. As soon as we sat down, Nazma began. This time, there was no soft approach. She told everyone present that I had refused to sign. She said I was hiding behind lawyers and documents. She said my father would be ashamed of me. She used the word ashamed more than once. She repeated that Imran was being denied his birthright. My grandmother looked at me with wet eyes. She asked me in a shaky voice why I was being so hard. She reminded me of how the family had helped us when I was small, how my mother had always taken care of her siblings. She said it was not good for cousins to fight. My mother tried to explain again that we were not refusing anything real, only asking for proof. Her voice broke. Nazma snapped at her, saying she was being controlled by me. She painted my mother as weak, me as cold, my father as a secret sinner, and herself as the only honest one. Annika started recording small clips on her phone, pretending to check messages but holding the camera too steady for it to be accidental. I noticed the angle. I noticed that she focused on my face when Nazma used words like greedy and cruel. It was like watching someone arrange pieces on a board for later. I listened. I did not raise my voice. When they gave me a chance to speak, I said, as simply as I could, that what we thought or felt did not change facts. I said that dates and records existed for a reason. I said that a court would not ask who cried the loudest. It would ask for documents. Nazma scoffed. She told the room that I thought I was better than them just because I had an office job and a big house. She said I had forgotten where I came from. She said that if my father had not been helped by their side of the family, he would never have built anything. That last sentence made my teeth clench. I thought about all the hours my father had spent lifting bricks, dealing with broken clients, chasing payments. I thought about him checking budgets at 2 a.m. while everyone else slept. Help from my mother's family had always gone one way, but I did not say that out loud. Not yet. Instead, I told Nazma that if she kept insisting, everything would go into a legal process. I said that would mean doctors, financial records, witnesses, maybe even tests. I said it calmly, but clearly enough that even my grandmother understood that this was not going to be a small private argument forever. Some cousins shifted uncomfortably at the word tests. Deepak finally spoke again. He suggested quietly that maybe they could negotiate, maybe settle for something less than half, just to avoid what he called trouble. Nazma glared at him and said she was not begging. The longer she talked, the more I saw something that had been hidden before. She was not just angry, she was desperate. She mentioned bills, school fees, loans, landlords, all wrapped in complaints about fairness. She believed that this house was her way out. That belief made her dangerous. When it became clear that we would not agree to anything that day, the gathering broke apart. People stood, stretched, shook their heads. Some hugged my mother, some avoided my eyes. Annika posted something on her phone, her thumb moving fast. On the drive home, my mother was very quiet. Then, suddenly, she started speaking. She told me about a time, years ago, when there had been another rumor about Nazma and some man in the family. She said she had never told me because I had been younger and she had wanted to keep peace. She said that my father had been furious when he heard. He had told her that he would not let anyone drag his name into such games. He had gone to see a lawyer soon after. I asked my mother if she remembered around when that was. She thought for a moment and gave me a rough year. It matched the date in red in my father's notebook almost exactly. At home, we both sat in the living room, tired in different ways. My mother rubbed her forehead like she was trying to push away a headache that had lasted years. She said she felt stupid for not connecting things sooner. I told her that it was not her job to think like that. It had been my father's job, and he had done it. Now it was mine. She looked at me for a long time. Then she stood up and went to her bedroom without a word. I stayed where I was, staring at the patterns in the carpet. After a while, I heard her wardrobe doors open and close. I heard small boxes moving, hangers sliding. Then her footsteps came back down the hallway. She walked into the living room holding a flat brown envelope. It was sealed, the edges a little worn from years in some dark corner. My heart beat faster as soon as I saw it. She said my father had given it to her some time ago, around the period of the first rumor. He had told her to keep it safe and to give it to me only if there was ever serious trouble in the family about money or children. She said she had almost forgotten about it until now. She placed the envelope on the coffee table between us, like a small, silent object charged with something heavy. My name was written on it in my father's handwriting. Seeing that alone made my chest tight. My mother told me that she thought the time had come. She said she trusted that whatever was inside, my father had written it for a reason. Then she stepped back, as if afraid to touch it any longer. I reached out and picked up the envelope. The paper felt dry and fragile. I turned it over in my hands, feeling the seal under my fingers. For a moment, I just sat there, holding it, caught between wanting to open it right then and wanting to wait until I had a clearer head. I did not break the seal yet. I only sat with it resting in my palms, my father's name and mine between my fingers, while the house around us seemed to hold its breath. I did not open the envelope that night. I took it to my room and placed it on the desk next to my father's notebook. I turned off the light and lay in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling its weight even from across the room. It was like a small stone in the middle of the floor that you keep stepping around until you finally decide to pick it up. In the morning, I woke up with a clear thought in my head. I needed to see Claudia before I opened anything from my father. I made breakfast for my mother and told her I had to go to an appointment related to my father's papers. She asked if it was with the lawyer from the message. I said yes. She looked scared, then relieved, then scared again. She asked if I thought my aunt would come. I told her I didn't know yet, but that for now, this meeting was just to understand what my father had done. The law office was in a modern building with glass walls and a quiet lobby. The air smelled like coffee and printer ink. People in suits walked in and out with folders under their arms. I felt underdressed in my simple shirt, but I reminded myself that paper did not care about clothes. The receptionist greeted me by name when I said who I was. She told me that Ms. Weber would see me shortly and asked me to sit. I waited on a soft chair, watching people move through the hallway with that strange mixture of hurry and calm that only exists in offices where serious things happen every day. Claudia came out to meet me after a few minutes. She was in her late 40s, with her hair pulled back and glasses on a chain around her neck. She had a folder in her hands. On the side, I could see my father's name printed in neat letters. She shook my hand and offered her condolences. Her voice was neither too soft nor too hard. She led me into a smaller meeting room with a round table and 2 chairs. She placed the folder on the table between us. She started by asking me some basic questions. How my mother was doing, whether I was living in the house, whether there were any other people claiming to be heirs. I told her about my aunt in general terms, not giving every emotional detail, just the facts. She was saying her 1-year-old son was my father's child and that she wanted half the house. Claudia listened without interrupting. Then she opened my father's folder. I leaned forward, but she held up a hand politely and said we would go through it in order. She showed me the first pages, standard things, like wills and older notes from years back that had since been updated. She explained in simple language that my father had not left things random. He had done what many people said they would do one day and never did. He had actually written everything down and signed it. There were also newer documents in the folder, thicker, with more stamps and signatures. She told me that a couple of years ago, my father had made more detailed arrangements about the house and some other assets because he had been worried about possible trouble from extended family. She used his words. It felt like hearing him speak through her mouth. I asked her what exactly he had done. She smiled a little and said that she would explain everything, but that there was a formal way to do it. There were some things that had to be said in front of certain people, not just between her and me in a small room. She said that, for now, what I needed to know was that my father had been very clear about who his legal heir was and what should happen if anyone else tried to make a claim. She asked me if I had any documents or messages from my aunt regarding her claim. I told her I had texts, call logs, and group chat messages. She nodded and said those might be useful later. She suggested that I forward copies to her email. I agreed. Then she said we needed to take a couple of steps before the family meeting. Some things had to be confirmed and updated to reflect that my father had passed and that I was now the only person left to execute his instructions. That was how we ended up at the bank. The bank's meeting room was small but tidy. There was a glass wall on one side through which I could see people at counters moving money they would never touch with their hands. A bank officer sat with us, flipping through printed forms. Claudia explained to him who she was, who I was, and what we needed. I signed forms to confirm my identity and my link to my father's accounts and the house. Some were simple, like updating contact details. Others were more serious, connected to how certain things would be handled going forward. The bank officer checked my ID, then our signatures. Claudia made sure each line matched my father's instructions exactly. If something was not worded the way she liked, she asked for it to be rewritten. I saw a little of my father in her then. I did not fully understand every clause, but I understood enough. We were not creating something new. We were locking into place something my father had already built. After the bank, there was one more stop, a notary office. It was a small place above a shop, with a tired plant in the corner and shelves full of thick books. The notary, an older man, read a document Claudia had prepared. He asked me to confirm that I understood what I was signing, that I was not under pressure, that I was who I said I was. I said yes. I signed. He stamped the paper with a heavy, official sound. We left with a few more sheets in Claudia's folder. She told me that with these steps completed, things were now aligned with my father's last instructions. She said that the next step would be the family meeting, where she would present the necessary parts to everyone at once and explain them. On my way home, I thought about the weight of the pen in my hand, the feel of the stamp hitting paper, the way each signature had felt like a small door closing on chaos. Back at the house, the envelope from my father still sat on my desk. The brown paper seemed darker now in the afternoon light. I sat down in my chair and looked at it for a long time. Then I picked it up. I broke the seal carefully, trying not to tear the writing. Inside, there were a few pages folded together. The top one started with my name. Seeing it, in his handwriting, made my throat tighten. I read every word, slowly. I will not repeat what he wrote in detail. Some things are only for a son and his father. But I can say this. He knew his family. He knew my mother's side even better than I had ever realized. He knew that, after he was gone, there would be people who would look at his house and his bank accounts and see not his life's work, but a prize to claim. He wrote about integrity, about mistakes he had made and tried to correct, about loyalty. He wrote about me, about what he hoped I would do when he was no longer here to stand in front of me. He wrote that if anyone tried to use a child, any child, as a tool to take what was not theirs, I should not yield, no matter how loud they cried. At the bottom of the last page, there was a short note about Claudia, by name. He said he trusted her. He said that if things got ugly, I should listen to her and to the documents, not to the screaming. When I finished reading, I sat back and let out a long breath I had not realized I was holding. The fear that had been crawling around my chest for days settled into something harder and clearer. It did not feel like anger. It felt like resolve. I put the letter back into the envelope and locked it in the drawer of my desk. I did not need to wave it at anyone. Its job was to steady me, not to impress them. That evening, my phone started to vibrate again. Nazma left voice messages. She said she knew I had gone to a lawyer. She said she had heard that I was moving things around at the bank. She accused me of trying to hide money, of cheating Imran. Her words were sharp, almost panicked. I listened to each message once, then forwarded them to Claudia's email. In the family group chat, the pressure grew. Nazma wrote long paragraphs about justice and betrayal. She called me selfish. She said my father would be ashamed. A couple of cousins agreed with her in short comments. Others stayed strangely quiet. I answered with one simple message. I wrote that my father had left written instructions, that a lawyer was handling everything, and that we would all meet at her office on the date she had set. I added that until then, I would not discuss the house in the chat anymore. Nazma answered with anger, of course. She said I was hiding behind strangers. She said my silence was guilt. I did not reply. It was not my job to make her feel better. The days ticked down slowly. I went to work. I ate, slept, took care of my mother. Between tasks at the office, I organized a private digital folder with everything, screenshots of Nazma's messages, the hospital summary, copies of the land records. I did not know which pieces Claudia would actually use, but I wanted everything ready. The night before the meeting, my mother barely slept. She walked from her room to the kitchen and back, making tea, washing clean cups, folding already folded towels. She asked me again if I was sure about this. She asked me if there was any way to avoid a big scene. I told her that the scene would be smaller in a lawyer's office than in a courtroom or in our living room for the next 10 years. In the morning, I ironed my shirt slowly. I chose a simple, dark one. I did not want to look rich or poor, powerful or weak. I wanted to look like what I was, a man who belonged in that office as much as anyone else. We drove to the building together. My mother held my arm so tightly that my fingers tingled. When we stepped into the lobby, the cold air hit us again. The receptionist recognized me and nodded, then looked at my mother and gave a small, sympathetic smile. Claudia had booked a larger conference room this time. The glass walls showed a long table inside, chairs on each side, a screen on one wall. When we arrived at the door, it was still open. I could see people already seated. Nazma was there, wearing a bright outfit that did not match the serious room. She sat close to the head of the table, with Deepak next to her. My grandmother, Farida, sat near the middle, looking lost and nervous. Annika sat at the far end, her phone on the table in front of her like a little black eye. A few other relatives had come too, some out of loyalty, some out of curiosity. As my mother and I stepped inside, conversation stopped for a second. All eyes turned to us. I felt that same heat on my skin that I had felt at the birthday party, but this time it did not burn in the same way. This was not their stage. It was not mine either. It belonged to the documents. I helped my mother into a chair near the side. Then I sat down next to her. I placed my folder on the table, closed. Nazma watched it like a predator watching a door. A moment later, Claudia walked in. She carried a heavy folder, thicker than mine, under her arm. She greeted everyone with polite words and a neutral expression. Then she stepped to the head of the table. She placed the folder down, opened it, and took out a neat stack of papers. The room seemed to tighten around that small movement. Then she reached back and gently closed the glass door to the conference room, separating us from the noise of the rest of the world. Claudia began by thanking everyone for coming. Her voice filled the room but stayed calm. She said this meeting was to review the estate of Yusuf Rahman and to address recent claims about inheritance. Nazma jumped in before Claudia could say more. She pushed her folder across the table and said she wanted her son's rights recognized. She repeated that Imran was my father's child. She said she had proof and that she was tired of being treated like a liar. Claudia listened without interrupting. Then she opened Nazma's folder first. Inside were loose papers, old bank transfer slips from my father to Nazma, some handwritten notes, a rough letter without a date or witnesses. Claudia spread them out. She explained in simple words that the transfers looked like personal loans or help, not legal child support. The handwritten promise had no signatures from witnesses, no notary, no legal power. She said these papers did not prove paternity or inheritance rights. Nazma's face tightened. She said Claudia was on my side. Claudia shook her head and said she was on the side of the law. Then Claudia opened my father's file. First, she showed a short medical letter attached to hospital records. She read a part that mentioned my father's surgery and its consequences. In clear language, it said that, from that time on, his chances of fathering a child were extremely low. The date of that surgery came before the window Nazma herself had given for Imran's conception. Claudia placed that page in the center of the table. The room went quiet. My grandmother stared at it like it was something from another world. Next, Claudia brought out the property documents. She showed the old purchase record with both my father's and my name. Then she placed a newer document on top, a living trust. She explained that 2 years before his death, my father had transferred full ownership of the house into this trust, naming me as the sole beneficiary and sole heir. There was a no contest clause. She read it out loud. Any relative who challenged the trust in court would lose any minor gifts they might otherwise receive. Nazma tried to argue again. She said promises mattered more than paper. Claudia did not raise her voice. She simply added one more layer. Printed copies of Nazma's messages. Threats about going public. Demands for half the house. Hints that she would ruin my name if I did not agree. Claudia said, very clearly, that if Nazma pushed further, these messages, together with the false paternity claim, could be used as evidence of extortion and defamation. She said that, in such a case, Nazma would not only lose any claim, but might also face serious consequences. Annika lowered her phone. My grandmother covered her mouth. Deepak stared at the table. Nazma looked at each document one by one, but the fight in her eyes had changed into something else, fear, then anger, then something like shame. She said weakly that she had only wanted a better life for her son. Claudia replied that my father had already given his son a home and that the law recognized only one son in this room. I stood up. I did not say anything more to Nazma. There was nothing left to say. I picked up my small folder and the envelope with my father's letter. My house keys were in my hand. As I walked out of the glass room, the voices behind me blurred into a dull hum. No one tried to stop me. The door closed softly at my back, and for the first time since my father died, the weight on my chest felt like something I could finally carry alone.